Good morning and welcome to Rising. We have a great show for you today. I'm Amber Duke, joined at the desk by Niall Stanage. Good morning, Niall.
Great to see you, Amber, for our regular Friday debate. How have you been?
I've been doing well. How about yourself?
I am good. It's a lot of news all around, but we're keeping up with it so
Yes,
far.
doing our best, right? Well, in an about-face late Thursday, the White House suddenly pulled its nominee for UN Ambassador, Elise Stefanik. Here she is on Fox News last night.
This is about stepping up as a team, and I am doing that as a leader to ensure that we can take hold of this mandate and deliver these historic results, that we can pass this reconciliation bill, which will have tax cuts, it will have border security, American energy independence. It really came to a culmination today, but it was a combination of the New York corruption that we're seeing under Kathy Hochul, special elections, and the House margin. And look, I've been in a House. It's tough to count these votes every day, and we are going to continue to defy the political prognosticators and deliver victory on behalf of President Trump and, importantly, the voters across this country.
President Donald Trump took to Truth Social to explain what happened, writing in part, "I have asked Elise, as one of my biggest allies, to remain in Congress to help me deliver historic tax cuts, great jobs, record economic growth, a secure border, energy dominance, peace through strength, and much more, so we can make America great again. I don't want to take a chance on anyone else running for Elise's seat. The people love Elise, and with her, we have nothing to worry about come Election Day."
So apparently the administration is worried about its narrow majority in the House. Democrats overperformed in one race this week in the Pennsylvania State Senate, where they won that seat in a major upset. Stefanik comes from a solidly red district in New York State, but with her back, no special election will be held to fill that.
This is what Speaker Mike Johnson had to say about the issue. "There is no doubt that she, meaning Elise, would have served with distinction as our ambassador to the United Nations, but we are grateful for her willingness to sacrifice that position and remain in Congress to help us save the country. I will invite her to return to the leadership table immediately. There will also be a special election in Florida to replace 2 GOP seats, one formerly held by Mike Waltz of Signalgate fame."
Could Republicans be getting nervous? That's certainly what many Democrats believe. Democratic pollster and strategist Matt McDermott wrote, "Republicans sidelining Elise Stefanik because they're afraid of losing a Trump plus 20 seat should shatter the current conventional wisdom about the state of US politics. The political ground is shifting and fast." And the Young Turks host Cenk Uygur was, in his words, thrilled. He posted, "I'm thrilled that neocon Elise Stefanik's nomination to be our UN ambassador was pulled. She would have spent the entire time trying to start wars on behalf of Israel. She can now go back to representing Israel in Congress instead." Domestic politics aside, Stefanik's move leaves a vacuum on the global stage. There will be no strong US presence at the UN Security Council, and many analysts wonder whether Russia and China will fill that void to push their own agendas. Amber, a few things here. I mean, I take the point that this is not the pulling of a nomination for some scandal or because Elise Stefanik didn't have the votes or anything like that. It is, I think we all agree, related to the congressional math. That math is very tight, as we know, and I do think that there is at least a legitimate point to be made about Republican nervousness. I think a lot of coverage has focused on President Trump's moves in the early part of his presidency. In his approval ratings, he's between 45% in a Reuters poll, 47% in The Economist. So those are not landslide numbers when you're only protecting a very narrow congressional overall majority.
Yeah, I think it was probably less about concern that the Republican wouldn't ultimately win the seat. Elise Stefanik won it by about 20 points. But the problem was that the seat would potentially be held open for 3 months or even longer. There was a bill floating around the New York House to increase the length of time over which the governor could choose to hold the special election. And there was an interesting sort of negotiation happening between Kathy Hochul and Trump, where she said that essentially she would leverage this special election bill in exchange for Trump not going after the state's congestion pricing system. So we'll let you have your special election in, a matter of weeks or a month if you decide to not go after that plan anymore and get rid of congestion pricing, because the Transportation Secretary, Sean Duffy, has tried to revoke that rule and not give it federal approval.
Which is a very big issue in New York and New Jersey too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that was one of the elements at play that hasn't been covered much in the previous week or so, as Elise Stefanik's nomination seemed to be in jeopardy. But I don't think this should be too surprising, because she has been sort of lingering since her nomination was first announced. And talking to sources in the Senate and people close to Elise Stefanik, they were talking about eventually getting her through after this initial continuing resolution process, and then her vote still wasn't scheduled. So that was a huge warning sign, obviously.
Yeah, that has been a delay. And I totally agree with you in relation to actually Stefanik's seat. The issue is not that Republicans would be expected to lose it. The issue is that Kathy Hochul, the Democratic governor, would pause it for as long as possible to cause the maximum amount of trouble for Republicans in the House. I do think, though, it's interesting. We mentioned in the introduction there are these 4 vacancies in the House at the moment. 2 of them had been Republican seats, 2 of them had been Democratic seats. But it is interesting, in the seat down in Florida, which is Mike Waltz's former seat, that was a seat that Waltz romped home in by about 30 points. And we now have polling from St. Pete polls showing the Republican only 4 points ahead there. Democrats are talking about the fact that they're doing very well in fundraising in that race. And obviously, if, and I still think it's unlikely, honestly, but if the Democrats were to pick up a seat there, then the math would get very, very tight indeed. Because right now, it's only a 218 to 213 House with those 4 vacancies.
Yeah, one of the things that we haven't heard in the aftermath of this as well is who would be Elise Stefanik's replacement to be UN ambassador. Trump himself hasn't floated any names. I haven't seen much reporting about who he's even considering at this point. So that suggests an even longer delay for who the U.S. is going to have in this sort of soft power position. Obviously, they're not making policy, but it is important for the UN ambassador to be there to articulate the U.S. position on foreign policy. So I wonder what you think this portends in terms of American dominance in that session. I mean, there's going to be one next week, I believe.
Yeah, I think that not having a permanent ambassador is suboptimal in that respect, at the least. Now, obviously, other people can give the American line, and with President Trump at the helm, it is generally, it's him who dictates the line anyway, so he can say whatever he wishes.
Sure.
The other thing which would take us into, I think, a whole other realm of the discussion is Stefanik's hostility to the United Nations. Now, I would obviously defend the United Nations on the issue that seems most salient here, which is Israel and the Palestinians. Stefanik would not at all. She has been a very, very severe critic of the UN in that respect. The Trump administration has positioned itself in very firm opposition to, I think, or skepticism of the United Nations as an international body. I would, as I say, defend it. I think that it is unfortunate that UNRWA, the refugee agency, is being so undermined, because a lot of Palestinians depend on it for life and health. And nutrition.
I'm obviously not as gung-ho on the UN as you are, but I would say I tend to agree with Cenk Uygur, actually, that Elise Stefanik's sort of myopic focus on Israel and her intense aggression on it is not really the America First kind of policy that Trump ran on in terms of foreign policy. So I'm not, heartbroken about that, about her not being in this position. And I actually said back when Elise Stefanik was named as the House Conference Chair, replacing Liz Cheney, that this was effectively more of the same. I mean, it was very obvious Liz Cheney was not forced out because of her voting record, but because of her, very vocal opposition to Trump. And when they put Elise Stefanik in that position, I had to remind people, she voted for the Equality Act. She supported amnesty for DACA recipients. She criticized Trump's decision to leave the Paris Climate Agreement. So she has obviously moved on her politics since being embraced by Trump, embraced by the Republican Party and its leadership. So I think there are some questions about her conservative record that are entirely legitimate and cause a lot of people who are more on the MAGA America First side to be skeptical of her sincerity on those issues.
Well, and her sincerity in relation to Trump personally, because to roll back the tape even further, there was a time when she was very critical of Trump, talking about his rhetoric being offensive and so on and so forth. She has very much changed from that and become much more aligned with him personally, and at least purports to represent his agenda, although whether she actually does is more debatable.
It's kind of reminiscent of Nikki Haley,
Yeah.
the UN ambassador who
Right.
served in Trump's first term, who was happy to take the job and speak kindly of Trump when it was beneficial to her, but maybe not as much when she was running against him in the last primary
Her
election.
interests changed in that respect, for sure.
Up next, JD Vance's view of the world. That's here on Rising. Stick around.